I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on February 4th, 2026 at 7 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. A reminder that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I am going to reach out to our state senators and reps and see if at one of our next coming meetings that they would be able to attend so that they can give us whatever they're trying to pass through to help with our current situation, which I'm sure isn't much, but it's always good to make sure we're letting our needs be known. The next item is the oral communications from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? Seeing none. School improvement plans. On January 20th and 21st, the committee received presentations on the school improvement plans for 2026 through 2029. There was a question raised about approval. While the law does not require an approval, district policy does. Before a motion is made, I would just like to ask the committee members for feedback on whether to refer the policy in question back to the policy subcommittee for review or leave it as is. I personally would like it to be left the way it is so that we're at least voting and confirming what the schools are saying of their improvement plans.
I would agree.
I don't have a strong opinion. I just think if it goes back for a review, it's just for further research on what other districts do and sort of how that's handled without a sort of prejudiced push from the committee, the full committee, one way or another, right? So it would be more of a, let's take a 360 look at it more than what we can look at right here at the table. But honestly, if it doesn't go there, that is fine with me.
I think my perspective on it was we like to align everything that we do with the goals of the district, and this way at least we're saying that we agree or aligned with whatever. That was just my opinion. So that we're all handshaking together. But I'm open to, I'm not stuck on that either, so whatever the will of the committee is.
I also tend to support it staying as is. Voting on the school improvement plans is nothing but an extra layer of transparency.
Okay. Nobody has any objections to it, we'll leave it the way it is. Can we have a motion? Oh, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2026 to 2029 school improvement plans as presented by the principals on January 20th and 21st, 2026.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I know that we had asked Michael to go back and work on it a little bit more. Were we going to wait for that to be brought back to us?
So technically, it would be your action here. So because you have a policy that says you approve them, then it would be you disapproving it and sending it back to the school council is technically what you're doing because it's the council's plan. So that would be dependent on this vote. If the vote is to approve it, it is the approved plan.
it's up to the committee what we decide that we want to do. I know that there's a lot of great things happening at Salisbury, and I think with this being Michael's first year, it's probably why certain things he's working on, he can't put into words or hasn't come up with the words to put in there. So it's up to the committee as we vote whether we want to send Salisbury's back or let Michael take this year to take a look at what the improvement plan is and make adjustments for next year.
I would say just looking at it from what it's like to be on the ground in the school, I'm confident that they are doing the things that we need them to do. I think to send that back would amount to being viewed as creating busy work and nothing that necessarily moves forward anything that helps student learning. It would just be spending time to specify for us what it is that they're doing. And I think that morale is going to be low enough as it is that it doesn't serve us to add to that.
Did you?
I was just going to say, I don't think we explicitly stated to have him come back and redo any part of it, so I don't know if sitting here tonight that sends the correct message to then, we didn't say like explicitly, please come back with these things, so I don't know if it's a great idea to then send it back at this juncture, rather than just do as, I agree with Paul and Linda, where it is his first year, he is doing great things, we all understand that, and next year he'll come with more of what we were looking for. But unless I'm wrong, I don't remember any of us explicitly asking that of him. So I would be uncomfortable voting to send it back at this juncture. I know it was discussed what we wanted to see, but I don't remember explicitly asking Michael to go and come back.
So I don't oppose to moving forward and not sending it back. I just wanted to recognize the fact that in my view, because of the conversation, and he said he would bring it back, that I was under the assumption that we were going to revisit it, but if we're ready to move forward, then I don't have opposition to that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed?
That was an abstention.
And any abstentions, sorry. Yes. Sorry. The next item is the FY27 operating budget. Saturday at the budget workshop, the committee asked the superintendent to prepare a modeling of an FY27 budget with a 2.4 million increase, a drop of roughly 2.2 million from the budget request made on January 20th through the 22nd. I'm going to turn this over to the superintendent for an update, and then I will open it for the committee discussion.
Thank you, Linda. So you have, excuse me, in front of you tonight, a document that we've used in recent years to synthesize and give you next steps, try to make it not look anything like a budget because this is still preliminary. But based on the discussion we had at the workshop a week and a half ago, the guidance that you gave us, it wasn't a week and a half ago, that wasn't this past weekend, was it?
Saturday.
Wow. Sorry. Time is standing still. So from the workshop, there's nothing new that has been added to this. And so I'll walk you just quickly through the top of the summary there of what's changed and then get to what the cut. So again, the charge was we were looking at roughly $4.6 million level services. The biggest drivers there, health insurance, personnel, special education. That has not changed. So what we'll outline for you tonight is getting toward that 2.4 was the target you gave us. We didn't quite get there, but I'll explain why. So on the first page, just to share with you, the only thing we're adding at the school is the maintenance contracted services. That was actually in an aggregate line at the district level. This has pushed out increases for the schools themselves. There is still a district-wide increase that we put into place for general maintenance needs. So on page 1 and 2, all through the schools, those are the only changes for athletics. We do have all of the general stipends, the transportation, the officials, so that full request for contracted services is all in. We did also include the 3 new sports, which includes an additional esports coach, as we had talked about, that has gained great steam, girls flag football, and expanding the unified program to provide unified track and field as well. So those are included in this budget. From a district-wide student services, we are still including an adjustment for contracted services. Special education transportation is down. There was a placeholder of 1 student, additional transportation. We are not 100% confident we won't need that. We are not confident we will need that, but we are pulling that out. So that is a placeholder that we removed for $43,000. Out-of-district tuitions is down a couple placeholders. It still includes all students who I would say, are in discussions that there is currently on the table a path toward an out-of-district placement. So those assumptions are there. Some of the additional savings was CREST Collaborative. We were assuming a 10% increase in tuitions. CREST Collaborative, actually, all the programs that we have subscribed, we had a first pass with the budget at the last board meeting, and it's looking more like a 4.75, so that saved about $55,000. At the current time, we are still projecting a 10% for North Shore and other privates. We'll have to wait and see, but we're pretty confident those are unfortunately going to stick. The other tuitions is a student at Recovery High School that we don't know if they will return and don't have control over that. Just to clarify that, the Recovery High School is part of North Shore Consortium, but it runs almost like a school choice. So think of like a TECA, where if a student applies based on need, and again, it's based on recovery, addiction, so actively dealing with that, it's a supportive environment there. But we don't necessarily, it's not a placement we make, but we do get the bill. And then summer programs. So we had initially asked for $988,000 there on district-wide student services, and we're down. That's good news, down to $413, so there is a significant decrease overall in that line number from what was originally requested to what was here. From what we had requested, from what we had talked about and proposed, we're still down about $300 some odd thousand. Curriculum, we had talked about 3 new curricula. It was science, it was social studies at the upper elementary, middle school level, and world language. So this includes the science implementation, but not social studies and not world language. World language, we don't have a solution. For social studies, we've moved toward open source, that all of those that have been piloting believe we're moving toward an open source resource, which would not include a cost. So we reduced that down. District-wide technology is still fully included. And then the district-wide programs, I would just say there are a bunch of shifts. So that maintenance and grounds, we had requested 148, it's now 47 new. That has to do with some double counting as well as pushing some of that out to the schools. So that is accurate now. Utilities adjusted. The overall increase for salaries, it increased by $90,000. That actually is an offset to make sure we have some capacity. I believe it was Matt who made the comment Are we planning for the impact of potentially more choice out? So the cleanest way for us to do that isn't to float a higher choice charge, but to actually take one salary that we had baked into choice receiving. And so that's that increase there overall. And then in insurance in general, there's been shifts all over the place with the medical, currently assuming 14.4% increase, 13 on medics, 5 on dental. There've been some shifts in enrollments. There were some questions. This does include, you remember we shifted to 50-50 on dental for the current year. And then with the PEC had agreed that for retiree medical, we were shifting our medics from a 70-30 split to a, I can't do math this time of night, 67.5, 32.5 for next year. And then the following year, it's a 65-35 split. With the number on medics, that's a significant chunk of change. So that, it did include that savings, and it still does. Some of the additional savings also is making sure we're putting a little more off. Over the last couple of years, we have shifted food services, medical benefits off to the food services revolving. So the current year, we're charging off $165,000. Next year will be $200,000. So that is now, that increase is reflected there. So it was up, it was down, it was up and down, but that 1.783 is actually, it shows as a, I'm sorry, it shows that the 774, it actually came down about 110,000 from where we were. Everything else is the same. So all in, the increase we were showing at a little over 4.6 netted down to 4.28. So that's the everything we've talked about. If I take you to page 4 of 5, this is the, what do we need to do to move beyond that? So we've been having lots of conversations with the leadership team. I know the leadership team principals have met with any staff who we know would be directly impacted. Some of these will, it literally pinpoints an individual. Some of these, it's going to be it's going to take some time before we would know exactly who the impact would be. But these reductions are modeled assuming specific individuals so that we can model unemployment costs offset. 25% we set aside for unemployment. And then to know if there's any savings on medical insurances and such. So at this point, what we are looking at for cuts is 5 classroom teachers overall at the elementary. That would be 2 out of Newbury, 2 out of Salisbury, and 1 at Pine Grove. Just to note, Pine Grove has the largest class sizes now. They already have, I think 4 currently. 4 of their grade levels are already in the 20s. This puts 1 more of them. Newbury has 2, and it will put them both into the 20s. For Salisbury, this keeps the very small 6th grade in 2 sections rather than the 3, and then there would be another that would move into the 20s. But then their class sizes are right on that bubble, so to go from 3 to 2 goes from upper teens to well into the 20s. So we continue to work through that. Also 1 special educator at Salisbury. And again, this is not, this doesn't change delivery of IEPs. It's a matter of the overall population has continued to shrink, most precipitously at Salisbury. For the town of Salisbury, we've been having this conversation, and it's largely become a retiree community as we've had fewer and fewer school-age students. I actually just saw today, was reading quickly, the MSBA published their Conditions of the Schools report, and we're called out as one of the top 20 districts in the state for overall reduction over the last decade. And that is certainly, that's Rowley and Newbury as well, but to a significant degree, it's the school-age population for Salisbury. So that is a right size. That is not, that would be something we would look at even if we weren't in this situation. And then 6 instructional assistants, 2 per school. Again, that won't change service delivery. That doesn't mean we're not changing, we're not delivering IEPs, but it would be 2 IAs per school coming from various roles. At the middle school, as we've said for a while now, there really is no place to go. As long as we're keeping teams, we need 2 teachers per core per grade level. So without the ability to protect that, in order to make cuts at this level, it removes 1 teacher per core content area. It does not remove any programming. It does not remove world language. We still would have the ability likely to offer some electives. Obviously, that would shift with with 4 fewer educators. But it largely keeps programming intact. It would make larger class sizes. So it would be, again, English, math, science, and social studies, one for each of those core areas, 2 instructional assistants. At the high school, we have been trimming year over year at the high school. We've had departments, again, sections shift around the high school based on student enrollment, based on student need, and what courses are being requested. So just to note there, it is the biggest school, but it's also seen the greatest reductions in the past few years, and we're definitely going to bump up against having enough teachers to schedule out a full student course load. So with these reductions listed here, there's not necessarily electives that start to disappear. If we go into any other departments, these departments that are getting hit one more or fractionally, it's absolutely the electives that would be most hit. So at this point, it's a science tech ed teacher. It's really more on the tech ed side. It's a business teacher, so the business math department, 1 English teacher. It's actually a fractional VPA teacher, and that's based on course need, not based on saying we're not going to run something that students are electing to say they need. It's just based on need, based on student enrollment. Our LIFT program is the program where we work with students who are school avoidant, not necessarily on an IEP. It's not special education. It's those students who may be out of school, chronically absent, or just entirely absent. And it's a program where we work those students back in. So hopefully they don't land going out of district. And so we're shifting. We've had a clinical therapist and a teacher in that program. And so we're shifting, and currently, based on need or availability, we currently have a teacher and an IA, and it is actually working fairly well. So this model shifts that, so it's still the academic teachers are responsible for the academics, obviously, but the support is through a therapist and an IA. And then 3 instructional assistants at the high school. And then at the district level, in our business office, reducing 1 FTE. We currently have an accountant and 2 support folks, and so we'll be combining the accountant with one of those support roles. And then EL, English learning, our English learners, educators, we've been watching the trend come down as far as the overall need. And so again, this is far more a right sizing than it is a budgetary cut, but it would be 1.1 collectively that would be trimmed out across the district. So again, those savings at each of the levels are reflective of salaries, assumes an unemployment offset, and assumes if there is any medical or dental involved for benefits. So that brings down the total spend by $1.713 million. We had talked about at the workshop the fact that we are currently projected to get $75 more per student Chapter 70, which is nothing on a $55 million budget. It's $155,000. We talked about the fact that we're over budget on regional transportation, need to come down close to $80,000. And then our Medicaid reimbursements has not panned out, and it's getting more and more challenging. So we need to bring that revenue down. So when we net that out, even with $155,000 in new Chapter 70, we actually net $1,600 in new revenues to offset what is assessed to the town. So the net result there is $2,566,931, $2,566,931. To note, I had said before, You gave me a target, us a target of $2.4 million. We are waiting, anticipating, in working with our Maya health insurance rep. I know shares that with the town. We share him with the town of Rowley and the town of Newbury. As an underwriter, he's able to make some projections. As I said, we're assuming 14.4. He believes very confidently it's going to be less than that. And I believe that number would approach $2.4 million if what he believes the number is what we think is what the number pans out to be. He said he probably can give that to us Monday, Tuesday of next week. So if that does come in, that would be reflected, depending on your discussion tonight, that could potentially be reflected in the tentative budget. Again, you're setting the high water mark, so you can set the number whatever you want it to be, but just wanted you to understand how that factors in there. If you go over the page to the final page, page 5, the same data we had shared with you on Saturday morning and shared with the DCC. Driving this year is a significant shift in the enrollment, where Newbury is going down 9 students, Salisbury down 23 students, and Rowley up 17 students. And we say this every year. It's not just how much any one town is going up or down, it's what it does to that proportional share of the pie. So compound that with the fact that Newbury's minimum local contribution is up just under 100,000. Salisbury is actually down a little more than 11,000, and Rowley's is up 391,000. So we had done the math at that workshop on Saturday and shared with the towns that before we even start this process, on a 0 increase to our budget, Rowley is going up 423,000. Newbury is going up, would be going down about 90,000, and Salisbury would go down about 330,000. So that's the basis on which we build. So when you take those factors, layer in that 2,556, net off the whopping $1,600 in new revenue, you land with an increase in the preliminary for operating of 656,000 or 5.5% to Newbury, just shy of 1.3 million or 9.1% to Rowley, and 612,000, just shy of 613,000 or 3.7% to Salisbury. To note that our capital assessment, because our E&D was certified under 500,000, so that, again, the only reserve outside of stabilization, when we're over 500,000, we use 90,000 to offset the stadium capital assessment. We are under 500,000, so rather than offsetting the payment or the chargeback with 90,000, the towns will pay the full balance. And so that does, rather than each town going up 1,000, 2,000, which is what it's been in years past, they're going up a little more, still not a significant add. And then you have the collective preliminary total assessment down the bottom there. So just to note, it's worth saying, I'm assuming there are eyes watching and ears hearing. This is not something, the top line, the bottom line, right? The amount that we're spending is really the only thing we can control in the way we apportion our assessment to towns. So whatever that figure was 4.6 on Saturday, came down to 4.2, and with these reductions brings it to about 2.55. We don't have a say in how that gets apportioned to towns. And so we can't say, Newbury and Rowley could pay a little, Newbury and Salisbury could pay a little more to bring Rowley's down. We don't have that opportunity because we don't have an alternative assessment agreed with the town. So that is the outcome, or that is the output rather, and we don't have any control over that. So I'll pause there and answer any questions.
Does anybody have any quick? Go ahead, Paul.
I think you're saying with the IAs, it's not delivery of the services, so I'm assuming that's the grid services on IEPs that you're talking about, so primarily. But then they're doing work, so I'm assuming they're primarily in classrooms supporting students in that role, but if you can expand on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I would say to you, right, we couldn't remove these people right now without rescheduling the whole building, right? So it is, as you say, so that grid B, if you understand IEPs, where the services are taking place. So these these are largely these are not one-to-ones, right? These are not students who have a one-to-one and require a one-to-one. We're not taking that away. We have talked about the work we've done to shift, because there's some value in less one-to-ones and students getting more responsibility, but that's a work in progress, and that's been ongoing. So we're not making any budgetary decisions that stick us in a precarious situation where someone has a one-to-one and we're saying we can't afford it. So that's not the case. So these would be IAs that are supporting general classroom support, instruction, and so it would have to be, the building would have to be scheduled differently with the available IAs and the way that the special educators are used.
Sorry, I know you mentioned this before, but just to clarify, so you said at the high school, you don't expect any electives to vanish, per se? So
There would definitely be some impact on electives. I mean, that depends year to year, right? I mean, we had like AP Gov. So, right, it depends on the student interest every year. There are some, I don't want to start calling out courses, but, right, forensics, everyone wants to take forensics. Right here, this is maintained. If we had to go another science teacher, there wouldn't be a way to offer forensics. So it's those types of things where there could be a one-off elective that wouldn't be able to be offered, but the ones where we're running multiple sections, those currently are okay with these numbers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to go a little bit further. So if we're cutting down a VPA to 0.4, what are we losing?
So it would be all the same classes, chorus band, all of those would still be offered. It would potentially be, I mean, most of those are only offered in one section now because there just aren't enough students. So it's largely, there isn't a huge impact. We're overstaffed with VPA based on the current interest levels, even for the current year.
What about the middle school? Because they're covering both high school and middle school.
Yep, it is shared. All of these are shared now. So every one of the VPA folks, Sav, Todd, all of them, we're doing, there's one teacher who does all of anything choral music, 7 through 12, and then instrumental, 7 through 12. And then staff is now working with theater arts, 7 through 12.
Anybody else? What would the middle school class sizes be? Would they be in the 30s?
No. So it would depend on how it ends up getting scheduled out, and there's a lot to figure out here. So currently, educators are teaching, so we're dividing them across 4 sections, and then educators are teaching an elective. If we kept that model, there's roughly 300 students, just shy, next year projected. So if there's 3 teachers per grade level in 4 sections, the maximum would be 25.
Okay.
If we still ran 5 sections of some content areas, then those would be in the 20, like 20.
I was just concerned if it was going to be broaching 30 or over 30.
There is certainly no 30s anywhere in these numbers.
Well, these are definitely not things we like to see, that's for sure. So this bottom number is the number that we're assessed, if this was to stay the way it is right now, those are the numbers that would be assessed into the towns?
Correct. So the yellow is the operating, CapEx is the green, and blue is the combined. So again, you have to vote a tentative budget next month? Nope, next week. So we need to hear from you what that number is. Is it this, Is it higher, is it lower? That you want us to target for the tentative budget. And then, if it's different than this, what you'd be looking, where else you would be looking. I would say, right, so that the cuts we have here on this page are impactful. There's some, as I've said throughout, there are definitely some right sizings that are happening in this that would be happening regardless of a tough budget year. There are several that are impactful. The majority are very impactful. If we go beyond here, I don't want to be speaking hyperbole here, I would say we're going to deeply impactful from this point. So that's why, right, if there was one more, I'd been like, oh, I could take that and we're good and get that down to 2.4. And I just think where we're at with these current numbers, from here, it gets significantly more impactful. Obviously negatively impactful.
I would like to second that, because looking at just, for instance, our math department, if we were to lose at least more than one math teacher, we would have to lose at least a subject, just because there probably wouldn't be enough time scheduled for the students or for like the teachers to even physically teach that much class.
And I will say too, right, so again, the high school is an entirely different situation than an elementary. But the cut is looking like business. And then what would it be is we currently had a teacher who left mid-year. And then it would be to backfill. That doesn't mean we don't offer all those business courses, but there might be other undersubscribed math courses, and a math teacher would teach a separate business course rather than having a standalone. So this situation, I guess a benefit is that it allows us to have a teacher teach. A teacher can teach outside their license up to 20% or one section. So obviously they need to be qualified, but it may not be something they need to hold a license for and can teach that course. So that is in all the departments, specifically in science and tech, as are combined, math and business, that would certainly be happening.
Go ahead, Owen.
Just to have more precise, I know you're trying to be a little vague on purpose, I respect that, but just have like some more precise language when talking to people. Like, is it fair to say that deeper cuts means either precipitous like increases to class sizes or losing, course offerings?
Mm-hmm. So, I would say at the elementary, we've spent a lot of time talking about, we've been talking a lot of time, right? So it's either classroom or it's supports. It's classroom tier 1 instruction, or it's some type of support, i.e. literacy specialist providing intervention, math specialist providing intervention, special education services, or then we have specialists, right? Art, music, PE. So everything has been reviewed. At the elementary, we believe all the supports, right, all those other supports are critical. So then the discussion has been, is there an impact where we can say we could adjust a class size and still believe the supports and the rest of that are in place will be able to mitigate that? So that's the debate there. So it could be a variety of things, but it largely would be class size. At the middle school, because of the structure and the size of the school, we haven't made cuts to this point. So now this is the cut, right? This is the one we've been talking about not wanting to do, but here it is in front of you. You can't cut again there, right? So this is it. I mean, you can't do anything more at the middle school as far as teachers. You could remove world language. Certainly wouldn't be something we're going to recommend, but that's a choice you would have, right? So that would be the type of thing at the middle school. At the high school, I think we go to electives, right? All of the choices would start to disappear. Again, in varying degrees based on the number that we're working with. Feel free to jump in if I'm misrepresenting anything based on our conversations.
I know this is small potatoes compared to everything else, but just to consider the additional impacts of everything we're talking about. I know you've said that these positions represent specific individuals. Has there been any thought given to what that might do to extracurriculars, or how many of them are involved in that, or how many of those programs might be endangered as well?
Say more endangered.
If a specific individual who is represented on this paper is let go, how many extracurricular programs might that hit?
Might
I'm,
that
I'm not guessing that you have that answer off
That
the top of your
individual
head, but-
going with them because they are
Right.
whatever they.
So maybe somebody picks it up, but likely with the additional work that everybody's going to be doing next year, that will be a harder ask. And so we're going to beggar those programs as well.
Yeah, I would say to you, has that been discussed? Yes. It can't be a deciding factor.
No, obviously not.
It is an input.
I just think for public discussion, I think it should be,
It matters.
yeah.
I know, some of what's captured here is going to take small classes and move them to possibly normal sized or maybe slightly above average size. But I worry very much about the middle school and the high school and the loss of options to take electives. Like, we can say we're not going to offer, we're not reducing our offerings, but the high school population we're probably running 30-ish classes per block based on the enrollment numbers. And these reductions reduce 2 or 3 classes being run per block period. So, it's a significant percentage of what's available. And it means that students are going to have, even if they technically have the choice, it's not going to fit in their schedule more and more often. And so the opportunity to have a broad schedule is going to be reduced. And we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I have a hard time imagining we're going to stop doing it. And at some point, there really won't be those choices available to our students. And when I think about, our school district and our communities and the interaction between those, people choose to move into a community expecting that the public schools are going to be able to provide an education. And in these towns, with the value of the homes, that's a certain level of expectation. And as we dip away from that, reduction in those course offerings makes an impact. We're going to be impacting who chooses to move here too. Like, it becomes less attractive to move in. And the families who've already made the decision either to start a family here, or we have children and we're going to move here and raise them here, are going to be more and more frequently making the choice to get an education elsewhere. And in a community, for the younger members of the community, the schools are the center. They're the hub. And so if our schools, if families moving in start choosing to be elsewhere, our schools become less of a hub, our community becomes less of a community. So we've been doing this for a few years, and I don't see an end in sight. And that is frightening to the health of our school district, but also to the health of our communities. And when we go into DCC and hear about not being able to support a building project if we're trying to fund our schools the way they needed to be funded to provide an adequate education for our students, it feels like some of our community leaders are undercutting the whole idea of a community. So you said, what's that number? It's not lower than this. It should be higher. We're doing our students a disservice already with these cuts. Too many classes are going to be smaller. Those IAs coming out means that the students in the classes are going to receive less from the adults in the room, and at the elementary levels in particular, that will have impact for the rest of their education. This is already not servicing the needs of our students where we're at, and I would argue it's not servicing the needs of our towns.
I agree with Paul that I'm not sure we can go lower than this number. I don't know where else you can take it from without ruining the breadth of the high school. I think you're at the bare bones at the middle school, and our elementary schools already have a lot of special education in them, and as well as mental health. So I personally don't believe we can go lower than this number. And I agree with Paul that it's only, we're going to see this again next year. I mean, I don't see us getting out of this until somebody at the state level or federal level decide that education's important. Unfortunately, public education is becoming private on the backs of our towns. And I understand that this number is a big number, especially for Rowley, but I don't know how we go lower than this. And it's something that we discussed on Saturday, that I believe we have to go to our towns to start thinking outside the box. And some of the things that we spoke about, I think, have to go to DCC and see what the towns want to do. I think it's the only way the schools and the towns are able to survive. And I don't know if we want to mention what we had mentioned at the meeting on Saturday publicly now, or wait until we speak with our DCC and have it publicly said there. But I think the towns and the schools have to come together to figure out a better way to have funding for the school. Because our school is only declining more and more every year.
I think those are good DCC discussions, because I think they need to be at the table to engage with thinking outside the box with how we all work together.
So does anybody else have?
I agree with both Linda and Paul. I did want to ask another question, however, on the, on some of the line items in here that were not included, which the supplies and materials for each of the schools obviously were not included in there. What does that mean for the schools in terms of how they operate next year?
Definitely will have to be more efficient, right? I think you heard at the elementary, they were talking about, was it not Dibbles? Was it Dibbles? That was going from $1 to $11 a license. And so, yeah, absolutely. If we're going to continue using those resources, we have to reshift priorities. Again, would the principals be thrilled if we put at different iterations, we put the supplies back in? It doesn't add a massive amount of money, but is it meaningful? Absolutely. Is it going to be different? Is it impactful that we're not going to adopt a world language curriculum next year? Yeah, absolutely. But I think when we're talking about prioritizing the ability to close a gap like that, and again, haven't even quite got to the target you gave me, you can't do it with less, that's for sure. Teachers are already spending their own money.
If I could, real quick, just I think something that's important to take into consideration is some of the things that are in those supply lists or supply lines are things like subscriptions, Kahoot, Brain Pop, those sort of things. And I think the principals, in terms of supplies that actually go into students' hands every day, you know, crayons, paper, that sort of thing, they were very frugal in their planning for that, and they planned for that. So that's not necessarily meaning that we're taking those things out of kids' hands. Things in terms of like those subscriptions just might have to be thought about a little bit more.
I have one thought, one question. I guess I'll start with the question because it relates to Aaron's point. How close are we to a spending freeze at this point this year?
It's already frozen.
I was going to say.
Okay.
Has been
Yeah.
for 2 weeks.
Okay, so we didn't make it through February. And that's going to be worse. It's just, I mean, we just have to be realistic about the fact that we are going to underfund what we need if this is what happens.
So the one thing I can just clarify in that is some of these things are, some of the assumptions here are things that we've budgeted way too close and are having to freeze because, like the Medicaid, the regional transportation reimbursement, some of those the contracted services and some of the repairs that we know we're going to spend, and we haven't included those. And so we are in this budget, and there's a distinct choice to make sure we're right-sizing those lines where you as a finance committee, and now Owen Wright every month talk about, oh, by the way, we're blowing this line out of the water. So this has a more realistic starting point. So we're not having to do that year over year.
Right.
Again,
but
not
it's-
guaranteed, but.
Yeah, this is as soon as the tank breaks. And I have to say, as we're looking at this, over the past 5 years, taxes as a percentage of income for all 3 communities have gone down. Taxes have gone up, but the ability to pay has gone up as well. Taxes as a percentage of home value have gone down. This is not a matter of can't, it's a matter of won't. And I know that won't is a political thing, and I know that there are people who are happy to see cuts. But it's a matter of won't. And I can't, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. I will not support this. It's a moral issue to me.
I'd just like to add a final note of assent to what Linda mentioned earlier, that I do agree that this is the farthest that it can really go. I focus a lot on electives, I feel like, because I think it was Paul that mentioned, you know, the expectation when you see a community like our communities with these home values. I think that any cuts to electives at this point, beyond just the student experience, I think that I believe that would drive a lot more school choice. And so I think any cuts that would lead to less electives would, even if it helps now, it ultimately hurts 10 times as much in the long run. So, yeah.
I just also say here that I think what I hear from the teachers at the elementary schools with the IAs is that it's not necessarily working now, that we don't necessarily have enough IAs now. And I know that we can change how the IAs are scheduled, but seeing this level of reductions in the IAs in the elementary schools, I think we're going to see more services that are mandated by IEPs missed than you're expecting, because there won't be enough people who can deliver those services in the building. I think we miss services now, and I think we spend a lot of time scrambling to find coverages for meetings and for absences and for extra needs now. And one of the things that I think about every year when we put together these cuts is that the people who are going to experience the day-to-day impact of those cuts are the students and the people with the students 80% of their working hours. And so those people, other than we have Foster over here, but those people aren't here. So we don't actually get a picture of what the impact really looks like. We get a look at what the impact will be by the people who hear it once or twice removed, sometimes more than that. Anything that can be shifted to claw back some of those IAs at the elementary level, I think is critical for the student development. I know that we set you a number and you haven't arrived at a number, but if getting some of those IAs back means technology, or it means PD, or it means curriculum adaptations, and I think those shifts are more of a benefit when we're looking at the services that we're delivering now. The people in the room matter more than the PD or the technology. I'm calling out those two things, but it's the people in the room that are going to educate our students.
Does anybody else? Oh, sorry, Foster.
I do have a clarificational question for kind of how the whole process works, because I'm still kind of understanding it. The number that Mr. Forger here was given to reach, is that something that's been self-assigned of like how much money we've collected through taxes and other fundraising, or something like we're asking to get?
Yeah, so I guess this is a hard way to explain, but basically, we don't know yet exactly how much the towns have the ability to fund, but we have the average range of what they can do on a given year. I can say this number that's even here is well outside of what Rowley can fund as it stands today. They'd have to attempt an override, very likely, at this number, and they just had an override last year that passed, and it was fairly significant. And that, essentially, if you don't pass that, if the other two towns pass our budget, the only choice Rowley has at that point is to slash their services, attempt to significantly enough that they could try and fund our budget, because they're required by law to fund whatever our approved budget is. The reason that we came to this number, I actually, when we were at our workshop on Saturday, Matt had actually suggested coming down to $2 million, and I kind of counter-suggested $2.4 million, and the reason that I did that is because we need 2 out of 3 towns at town meeting to pass our budget in order for our budget to be approved. The 612 that's there for Salisbury, I'd say is, I don't want to even look at Mike right now, but it's based on their past numbers, it's pretty squarely in what they typically are able to afford. The 656 for Newbury is like middle to high of what they can usually afford. So the reason I suggested 2.4 as the high water mark for the budget, because this is where we typically don't go up from, but we could go down from here. I believe this is close to a budget that could potentially pass town meetings without Salisbury and Newbury having to have an override.
And you always try to have that balance that you want all three towns to pass. But unfortunately, without any alternative assessment, we have whatever the state says is the way it gets divided between the three towns.
And I'll just say, because I think it's all in our heads as well, soon we're going to have to go back for a building vote. That also requires, it's called a debt exclusion, but it's essentially another way to override taxes significantly higher. For a building to pass, it has to pass in all three towns. So if there's another override in between, I mean, you can't say, like, we don't know for sure, right? But chances are that there are going to be people that, you know, literally cannot afford. I hear Paul's point in saying that numbers are going up, but if you look at demographics, what's happening is we're largely aging in place communities, and the new buildings that are going up and the houses that are being sold and remodeled, which is typically what's happening in a lot of our towns right now, is, you know, there are these houses that sell for $350,000. They're in rough shape. They get often torn down to the basement, and then this enormous 3-story building goes up, and right, that gets sold again, typically within like 6 to 9 months, sometimes a year, and that's then going for $800,000. So that's influencing your property values, and the person that purchases that house is coming in at, you know, a significantly higher income level than the person that left that house, or they're a significantly higher income level than the community, and you're just, it's going to be a struggle, right? And I think that's in everybody's minds too, is that that even in communities that regularly override, which there are some that do, they simply say, we're going to outgrow our ability to pay for what we need to pay for in 3 to 5 years. So like Ipswich does this. They have an override roughly every 5 years. Even in the communities that do that, they know if they have an override more frequently than that, it becomes very difficult for their residents to bear that cost.
But
Needless to say, Foster, every year this is getting harder and harder for the towns to pay the bill and for us to send that bill to them. And that's why we try and have our state reps come here to have that discussion. But unfortunately, they're in these small communities here, not the big towns and cities that get all the money. So I don't know how we want to proceed here as to whether we're requesting Brian to come back with a lower number, or if we're considering it a high water mark.
Can I add one more thing?
Certainly.
So it's my personal opinion that this needs to be the high water mark that we go into the budget with, the tentative budget. But I just did want to add, so that it's out there in the public, when we were at DCC, one of the requests that I had made, because in the past Rowley has, you know, I guess it's been tough to tell, like, what's actually going on in Rowley's budget, just because while the meetings are held in public, the information isn't very public. And I had asked, because I think it's really important this year to kind of understand Rowley's budget situation. I had asked if we could get some additional information on that, and Brian, Rich, Paul Lees, Owen, and I received an email invitation to a meeting next Monday at Raleigh Town Hall to meet with 2 of the select board members, the town administrator, and the chair of the finance committee. So my hope is that as of Monday, we'll have more information. I will say out loud right now, I am not a fan of over coffee meetings. I like keeping things in public. My intent is that anything that's said there, that whoever attends could re-say in a meeting like this. I will say that up front to them. I don't believe in having these backroom discussions need to become public when they're part of the public decision-making process. And I believe that anything that I'm told in that meeting, you guys should hear too. Paulie's, I don't know I know Owen's not able to make that, but I would just certainly hope that we will bring back anything that we are hearing in that meeting here so that you all have the same information that we have to make the best decision possible.
So I have a question, Marissa. This meeting that we're going to, is this open to the public?
My guess is no, but I mean, it wouldn't be posted, and I don't think it was put out to the public. At least the email that we received, had a very specific set of recipients.
I guess I just don't see this really any different than a DCC meeting. They're open to the public.
Can you say that again?
I don't see this meeting that is being proposed being any different than a DCC meeting, and I think the DCC meetings are open to the public. So I'm in favor of what you're saying, that it really should be an open meeting. And the information gleaned from it should be shared with everyone.
Okay, thank you.
I would say my understanding is it's not. So it would be with Deb Egan and the office staff, that, the finance folks, along with Chair David and Vice Chair Nealand, and then Rowley School Committee members, Rich and myself, and Dennis Roy, who's the chair of the Finance Committee.
So the Daily News isn't coming? Or
No, and
local
it's not a
news?
posted meeting, there's no quorums, so.
Well, it doesn't feel good.
I know, but at least it's a start.
You're speaking to the microphone. I can't hear a word you're saying.
I said at least it's a start.
Okay.
We have to be as transparent. I feel the town should be just as transparent.
Of course.
And I think my hope is that this is an olive branch to some extent, right? I think there had to be some understanding when those very deliberate letters were sent, right? That wasn't a friendly overture. It was, even from what was said in the meetings, it was intended to be here's your line, you should stop at this line, rather than, consideration of anything else. And it wasn't a clear picture of what's happening, right? It was just here's Prop 2.5, we're cutting it in half, and this is your share. And then it went from there to a little bit more sharing in DCC, and we didn't have the letter, but their budget process doesn't start becoming public until after we vote our tentative budget. So what information was becoming public was essentially too late for us to be able to factor it in any way, right? And now it sounds like hopefully there will be some information available early enough in the process. I wish it was coming out publicly, because honestly, I hate restating things that someone has said to me because there is a risk of error there. But all we can do, given the situation that, has presented itself, is bring as much information back as we can. But I wanted the committee to know that was happening, because I think it's a piece that could be important. I don't know what's going to be said.
And so I just want to, when you refer to these letters, you're talking about in the past, almost on an annual basis, we'd get a letter in November or December from the Rowley Board of Selectmen identifying how they felt our budget process should go. Did we get a letter this year? I don't think we did. Okay.
We haven't got one in a few years because I think we've had the DCC meetings being more forthcoming. Like, at least they felt that we weren't dictating to them the number. I think we've given enough information now that the number starts in the assessments that happen don't come from the school. And I think there was a that's
I
the
do
word.
recall receiving a particularly pointed letter last year.
So we did, and it was actually the day that we voted the budget. So it was very, 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 very late.
You could be right on that. It's just, I've always said that it takes a village because it takes all of us.
I've never heard you say that before.
That it takes all of us to make this happen. And it should never be the school against the towns. We should all be working together, which is why at the DCC meetings, we're going to have some really hard and ongoing conversations of thinking outside the box. And it's important for the towns to open up what they can afford. You know, because I think even if Rowley's thought was the 2.5%, the state has already assessed them 2.4. And that had nothing to do with the school. And I think with us having communication back and forth of letting people understand of how the school budget is formed, I think has helped, especially when Narissa asked about having this meeting, that Raleigh was open to it. And in fact, we had the DCC and they already have it scheduled, so I think it's a great way, it's a great start, and in coming years, hopefully it continues that way. That we all have to be open and honest with what we can afford, because we're not going to have a school system if we continue to cut the breadth of our high school. More and more students will choice out, unfortunately.
Related to the DCC conversation, when I left Saturday workshop, I was under the impression we were going to put that conversation about structural things onto one of our agendas. That was kind of what I heard. So I'm hoping we're going to have that conversation here as a committee, not just going to DCC and saying.
But I think we have to start it at DCC, because I think we have to, because the towns have to be heavily involved with thinking outside the box as well. We can have the conversations here, but I think they should at least start there. At least that's my opinion.
I think it depends on what you want to say. So if you want to say the school committee believes that, you need to have the discussion here at the full committee first. If you want to be able to say, here's an idea, you can start at DCC. So I think it depends on how you want to be able to put that out there. Because I think, it's a different meeting when you say, you know, I think, or a couple of members think, or whatever, versus the committee has sat down and discussed this and believes that this needs to be, you know, we need to have some deliberate conversation about it.
I'm okay with the committee.
You need to move your microphone closer. Hey, you're fading.
I'm okay with having the conversation here with the committee, and maybe starting by stating my opinion would be that we need to start thinking creatively for the future of the district. And some of those conversations would start here. And if they happen to hit up DCC and want to become fully formed, yes, but we can't look at a budget like this and the future planning and not start thinking very creatively about how we move forward. That would be my kind of overarching opinion. There's no way to look at this budget, look at things that are coming up ahead that we know are happening, and not think we need to get more creative and we need to start really looking at all of our systems and how we operate and what changes we could possibly make to get through some of these challenges.
Okay, I believe that we are probably going to have this as the high watermark. Can we vote on that?
We don't need to vote on that because it's just guidance.
Yeah.
Sorry. We don't need to vote on that because it's just guidance to the superintendent. The actual vote would be happening next Wednesday for a tentative budget.
Does everybody have any opinions or discussions as to whether you feel that this number should be lower? So that is where your guidance is, Brian.
So a question for you in regards to, we'll target that, basically this is it, right? Unless, we'll certainly keep talking about things, and could things change? Yes. I don't anticipate things changing as far as where we would find savings for this figure. We'll certainly review it. The question would be, we have a conversation on Monday, we get a firm 125,000, making the number up, in savings on medical. Do you want this number down 125,000? Or do you want this to be the number for the tentative, and we consider that along with Chapter 70, regional transportation, as the budget process continues?
My personal here is that number. If things change, I don't want to stay with that number.
I disagree with that, because I already know that Rowley is going to struggle with that number. That I think if we see any savings, that some of it should come off the assessments. I could be wrong, but
I was going to say, I don't know, my thought in my head with putting the 2.4 number out there was that we were putting Newbury and Salisbury both in their range. This is the high end of Newbury's usual range. I don't know what their numbers are, because again, they're kind of early in their process as well. But 650 is on an average year, right? That's high on the high end for them. I had chosen, just in coming up with a round number, to put them a little lower. Because my thought process was, come into your tentative with a budget that you are reasonably sure that you could get past at those assessments.
So aren't we talking about the high water mark? So that's not what necessarily what the final budget would be, that we would still have discussions on where we would settle on? So I don't see why we would lower it before we had those additional discussions.
no, Brian's just saying if, like, this is the high water mark, and if,
We realize assessments that are coming in change, then he would want to know whether or not we want it immediately drop down by that amount, or stay at the high water mark until we figure out where we want to settle as a final budget, correct?
no, it's just where you're gonna put that money to.
I think it's also worth the fact that at some point you're going to start losing people the other way. I think there are people in Newbury who will vote against this because it's too low.
So I 100% agree that that is a risk. I don't, my personal take on town meeting politics, having sat in all 3 town meetings, I'm not sure that this is going to be to the point where you fail a vote.
Let me say this. We'll make the number come in here, because the reality is, if we get information on Monday, it's a verbal. Let's wait until it's in writing before we count on it. I've never known our rep to be a liar, right? But I think for a budgeting perspective, for us to be able to say, we'll wait until we have it in writing and keep the number here, and then that is the high water mark, and we can have those discussions with future discussions around other, you know, is there additional state aid? Are there other numbers that have come down? So I'm hearing this
That's fair.
2566931 is your tentative budget figure.
a question is, how are you intending to communicate this? Because I understand you've talked to individuals who may be affected. And I'm assuming there's been discussion, broader discussion with staff but I would say at some point and very earlier in this process, just because of the magnitude of this needs to be communicated more broadly. Part of that is in my thought, because there is significant magnitude to it. Like, it's going to be a change, and not a good one for many families in our district, right? But also just to stem bad information, because I feel like once drama will ensue if we do not have facts out there. So I guess my question is, as the chief quick communicator of the district, because we are slow on our end, what's your plan?
This will be my weekly scoop next week. So this week, the current week, we're interviewing the OPM on Zoom tomorrow to be the fun little quick introduction of the OPM. Next week, for my video, I'm working on framing out how to frame this as real, but not total shock and awe, right? Because there's the downside of, if this reads, right, everything is on fire, that there's no positive outcome there, right? Other than maybe people show up at town meeting.
I would say there's a point at which you need to show the staff you understand.
100%, absolutely,
Because,
yeah.
and I think that downplaying it too much is a risk there.
Not saying downplaying it, but also I think there's a risk of overplaying it too. So,
And this video would come out after we vote on the tentative amount?
yes, it would be next Friday's video.
I would argue that something should go to families prior to the meeting, to give them an opportunity to come in, weigh their thoughts, and
I was going to say, I think that's the public hearing, because I
Public
think at the
hearing.
end of the day, even in the tentative budget, we'll have a little more concrete of how this plays out. This is, I mean, it's fairly concrete. But the idea was to make sure, if this is the number, there was a lot of hypotheticals discussed with individuals. And if this is the high water mark, to be able to say, it's not going to get any better than this. So the people who would be directly impacted have a very clear message with them, and so use the rest of this week and then to next week about it being when the tentative budget's voted, to make sure people are clear and fairly communicated with.
ultimately, that process gives no voice to the people who have a problem with these cuts at any point in the budget process.
You're not finalizing a budget until March.
Excuse me, two of us can't hear over here.
Yes, but if next week is the high water mark,
Yeah.
that means this can't go up. So anybody who's bothered by the cuts here has no voice. They have no opportunity to weigh in and say this should be going up. They have no opportunity to call their select board members. They have no opportunity to do anything at all to take action on this. With cuts this egregious, I just feel that that is problematic.
I definitely hear what you're saying. I don't know where that fits into your process, right? Because this is your job to set the high water mark. And so there isn't a forum where they can come. I mean, certainly public comment next week. Yeah, I guess that's just a different process.
I just feel everything we do is weighted towards one side, and has been. That we're pushing the narrative of one side. We're saying that consecutive overrides isn't acceptable, but 3 consecutive cuts is acceptable. We are, I know I hear what you're saying about people struggling to age in place, but that's always the narrative. Every year, that is the narrative. And every year we go straight to cuts. And the narrative is never these kids who haven't had an opportunity to set themselves to have a correct budget and to take the responsibility of paying into the community that they live in. They're the victims. We play that these people who can't pay their taxes are the victims. The kids are the victims every year. And every year, it's the same thing, and it's the same narrative, and it's just, the schools are getting screwed. And we are going to build this new building on the backs of the kids who are most hit by the pandemic.
Can I just say, often it's both, right? You're hurting any time that you increase taxes, you are hitting families. Right? It's not, I totally respect what you're saying, but I also firmly believe that you have to look at a community as everyone. You know, we talk about aging in place because when you look at the statistics, the demographics, right? It's a significant portion of the population. But the reality is that, you know, we're also looking out for families in our district, and we have to consider them because that is how families are getting by.
I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm
there
saying
are
they're the
cuts.
only ones who've been considered. 3 consecutive years of cuts, they're the only ones who get considered ever.
Families?
Yeah, or the people, the taxpayers, for, I hate that term because it's, the only consideration is it affordable, is it affordable, is it affordable? And at some point, it's just like, what are we doing? I don't know. I reached my breaking point 2 years ago. I'm well beyond it now. This is grotesque.
Foster put his hand down, but it reminded me earlier, there should be a communication to students too. Sorry, that's why I smiled at you when you raised your hand, because I was like, oh yes, he's about to say it, and then you put your hand down.
Yeah, my thing was more so about if we're talking about getting the word out to students. I know personally, another way other than videos is, at least my family, and I know many families, really enjoy listening to the snow day calls. If you could do something like that, that's very much appreciated.
So are you telling him to call families with this news?
Like a jingle. I'm going to say that scoop is going to be fire. I'm really excited for it.
You're on your own with that one, but to Paul's point, I think we create the high water mark, yes. And if so many families have a concern and would like the budget raised and send enough information to their elected officials in their towns, that there's nothing stopping a town from coming to us, asking us to adjust our budget. And I hear what you're saying, that it should come from us, but looking at it the other way around, if a town is receiving overwhelming feedback from its constituents that they want to see a higher Triton budget, one, I would love that, and I would be so happy. But then that, I would assume the town officials would then come to us in a DCC or come to us in a formal way and say that our town has spoken and they would like to see a higher budget, and they overwhelmingly agree and would then vote to pass a higher budget. And I know that's idealistic, but I'm just going to your point. I would love if that happened, and the mechanism is there for that. It's just us that cannot adjust up or down. But there's nothing stopping Newbury, Salisbury, or Rowley from coming to us and asking for us to raise our budget if that's what they're hearing in their towns, correct? And I don't know
Never
if,
had an interaction that would lead me to believe that that would happen.
And if we already voted on the high water mark, we've already made a commitment that we're not going any higher. So I don't see how it would make a difference on what we were proposing for that year.
well, we're making a commitment based on what we know right now from our towns, correct? If our towns come with a different viewpoint because they've gathered more information, then it would be up to us to decide if that's enough to adjust our budget. I'm just looking at it from the other side.
I don't want to take up people's time. I know I'm fighting a losing argument. I just think it's,
I don't think you're fighting a losing argument. I appreciate everything you're saying. I'm just looking at that other side. If there is an overwhelming want to change the budget to go higher, does that mechanism work, I guess would be my question.
We would probably need an alternative assessment because they were already being told what the percentage breakdown is going to be. So if one town wanted it higher, the other two are going to have to go higher.
Can you just clarify your question? Are you saying could the whole budget number go higher and everyone's assessments? Or are you talking about like a town wants to take their assessment higher in order to raise the overall budget number? Or maybe you're saying neither of those things. I'm not sure.
I was just going to Paul's point that where's the mechanism for people to speak out, to ask for a higher budget? And if they're, and he had spoken about writing to the town or talking to their town officials, if that were to happen and a town were to come to us and say, overwhelmingly, our voting base has said we would like to see this, is there a mechanism for us to consider that? That was my question, just going back to hearing what Paul was saying. Because honestly, I don't think we've ever come up against it. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just wouldn't know what that mechanism would be.
So the short answer is the assessment formula is what it is. We have no other options. So if Newbury, Salisbury came and said, you know, our number is 6 something, but we want to actually put in $1 million, there's no way to do that. If Newbury and Salisbury both came and they said, we want you to raise the number and let the chips fall where they may with the third town, then could we raise the number? The high water mark tentative budget is not something we're bound to by law. We're bound to put it out and certify it. We are not bound to keep it as the high water mark. It's a tradition. I don't think it's ever been gone against that I know that it's
No, that
gone
was-
up from there.
That was my question. So
But there's no legal basis to stop you from going up after it's voted.
So if 2 of the 3 towns came forward, to Paul's point, and said, we've had enough, we do not want to see these cuts, Brian puts out a video, it gains traction, there is a mechanism for people to come forward and the town to come forward and say, we would like to see your budget come up to not have as many cuts. Is there a mechanism for that? That is my question.
That's why we have a final budget to vote on.
Just say to that point of, this is our process. We sort of touched on this conversation on Saturday as well, with when is that public hearing making sense in our timeline? And cycling back to bigger picture and out-of-the-box conversations, some of our timeline is statutory and some of it's regional agreement, I think. So, you know, I think that's part of it, is we have a regional agreement. Are there things that we can do both to make our process better and to deal with this structurally or whatever? Like we have to be having those conversations. I think to the point of who communicates with select board members or who communicates with us, it's always the loudest people, and it's never even 1%. The only time we even heard from 1% of the community was during COVID, and never about our budget. And the select board never hear from 1% of the community, but then 20% of the community go out and vote on our budget in the spring elections. The point of the communication, they're never going to say we heard enough to change our minds on raising taxes, because there aren't that many people who will communicate under any circumstances. So if there's ways to make it easier for us to gather information about what we're doing from stakeholders, like, I think we can consider that too. We don't get very much information from our stakeholders at these budget hearings. Even most years we have 1 or 2 people show up. So, you know, and I don't think it's because people don't care. I think people do care. I think they don't know how to be involved, and some of that is on us. But whatever, now we're getting further than I meant to go.
I do want to say one more thing. This is a much smaller ethical dilemma that I'm having than Paul is having, but I'm really struggling with having new sports coming in when we're looking at these cuts in the budget. New sports in general, like you're adding athletics and pulling away in academics.
I agree that that money would look a lot better in supply lines.
I know it's only 15 grand. I'm definitely not going to fight you on that because changing this just for that is right. But
then if you look at why some of our students are leaving, it's because of sports too.
fair, but this would be new, additional, right, or expanded. And it's really hard, I think, to rationalize expanding athletics or new athletics when you're cutting back on academics or,
That's fair.
existing programs that still have the level of interest to make them run.
Go ahead, Forrest.
So I understand that a lot of the problems that comes with funding is just each individual, town and what they can afford. Out of curiosity, are those decisions for how much they're willing to spend out of a committee open in this kind of environment, or the same way we can have it set up, or is it more privatized? Because if it's possible, could we just all show up to each individual meeting? If there's a problem with communication, if we all, and I know it can be harder said than done, but looking back at history, or Ulysses Grant, when he wanted to push the things through Congress, he showed up out in Congress's door with his entire cabinet. Is that something that's possible? I don't know, it's just something to think about.
Over the years that I've been on this committee, it depends on what is being cut when you have a large amount of people show up. If you were to cut, there was a mention of a half of music teacher one year, and I never saw so many people because the word got out that we were totally cutting the music program, which wasn't really what we were doing, but we got a whole bunch of parents come in. So just like athletics, if you were to say we're cutting athletics, you would have, when it comes to cutting some teachers, I'm not saying people don't care, but unless it directly affects their family. So that's what it comes down to. If we cut a whole bunch of teachers at the elementary school, you would see a whole bunch of elementary school teachers parents coming. So unfortunately, we can communicate this every which way we want, as much as we can, go door to door. I think you would still see this, unfortunately. But I'm all for any communication we can, because none of us like this, and I'm just seeing in future years it doesn't look any better. I think we have to, not that it's a good thing, but 87% of the districts now are in the same situation we are. So now that you have more school districts not getting any more money, that may make more people have their have their state representatives come to the meetings and explain, what are you doing for us, I think I keep saying that, our representation from the state has always tried to do the best they can. But again, we're up in this northeast with small towns up against those big cities. And those are the people who have more voices than we have. But any voices that people want to go to their select board or come here to state. If you're here for a public hearing, you're going to see how many people come. Again, it's not a lot of people show up. I wish more people would come. Wish this was packed every month.
Because it takes a village.
Because it takes a village, that's right. It takes all of us. I say that all the time. It's not just, I believe that deeply. That you at your level and the elementary school children, they're residents of our 3 towns as well. And I just think people forget that. That doesn't matter. All of you in the schools are residents of our 3 towns. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. So we're giving Brian the direction that this will be our high water mark. And as more funds come in, we can have that discussion as well. Everybody okay with that? Did you hear me?
Yes, I can. I just have one more comment. So Brian, in the past, all these meetings that I've been to, like this on an annual basis for I don't know how many years, we always come in with the high water mark, and there has never, to my recollection, been a discussion in the past that if we get a good report from health insurance, that somehow we take that and move the number down. In the past, I've always thought the number stays as where it is, and the district tries to allocate the resources as best they can. So I would not be in favor of trying to reduce the high water mark based on whatever good news you get from whatever expenses we have.
So I think I definitely heard that loud and clear, that not going to adjust, especially because it would be a voice confirmation, not in writing. But what I have heard, everything about IEAs to supplies and not athletics, we'll certainly kind of take a look at within this number, should there be some shifts. I don't think there are $100,000 items that shift, but there are some little ones that shift around. Certainly be able to do that. Yeah, take a look at that.
Okay. The next item is executive session. Tonight, we have an executive session planned for the purpose of planning and setting strategy for negotiations with union personnel, specifically the TRTA Units A and B, not to return to open session. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of planning and setting strategy for negotiations with union personnel, specifically the TRTA Units A and B, not to return to open session.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
No.
Oh, we got to go roll call vote, right? Yeah. Boy, I was just rushing right into that. Erin? We're going to go into executive session.
Yes.
Owen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paul Lees?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Now can I have a motion to adjourn? I don't need a motion to
You're
adjourn.
going to do it in executive session.
Thank you. Have a nice night.